Breaking news. Christian theology goes sci-fi. Exotheology. Breaking news, if you can call it that. This unfunded personal station has only now got the news that last year the Templeton Foundation has funded a conference on Leibniz's Theodicy in Lisbon. One of the lectures there was given by the Christian theologian Timothy O'Connor. Theologians are trying to keep their job, which is interpreting the Bible. Question: but if the Bible is the Word of God, and God is all-knowing and has the absolute truth, why is that word, that logos, so unclear that it needs interpreting? Answer: because it's God's business to do good for people. The good he is doing for theologians is to deliberately make his word so unclear and often wrong that through the ages and in modern times certain people, theologians, can make a living straightening up, correcting that word of God, the Bible, bringing it up to date in accordance with every new discovery in science. Lately, they've had to go sci-fi. Sci, to use scientific language to make it more respectable, and fi, fiction, because the Bible itself is all fiction, piling up more fiction is no biggie. Here's the theologian William Lane Craig trying to save his job.
During the last quarter century, a flourishing dialogue between science and religion has been going on in North America and Europe. Science and religion have discovered that they have important mutual interests and contributions to make to each other. Religion furnishes the conceptual framework in which science can flourish. The scientific enterprise is based on certain assumptions which cannot be proved scientifically, but which are guaranteed by the Christian worldview.
3 lines of reasoning are now all pointing to the same conclusion. Eternal inflation, dark energy, and string theory. Just the way it takes 3 legs to support a stool, these 3 ideas taken together support the argument that we may live in a multiverse.
When different lines of research all converge on one idea, that doesn't mean it's right, but when all the spokes of the wheel are pointing at one idea, that idea becomes pretty convincing.
Now that the mathematical equations in new scientific theories strongly point to a multiverse, William Lane Craig has had to relinquish one of his arguments for God, the teleological argument, which we covered in our previous breaking news clip. Hello, breaking news. The famous Christian theologian and debater William Lane Craig has as good as announced that he is dropping one of his arguments for the existence of God, and that is the teleological argument.
So could the fine-tuning be due to chance? Well, the problem with this alternative is that the odds against the fine-tunings occurring by accident are so incomprehensibly great that they cannot be reasonably faced. On atheism, at least, then, it is highly probable that there is no world ensemble. The fine-tuning of the universe is therefore plausibly due neither to physical necessity nor to chance. It therefore follows logically that the best explanation is design. Thus, the teleological argument gives us an intelligent designer of the cosmos.
But now, in his latest interview, Dr. Craig has clearly said that, yes, it is possible.
Well, are you open to the possibility that this universe in which we think, at least, that we live, is one of several?
Oh, yes, of course, I think one has to be open to that.
So it is only logical to conclude that Dr. Craig is dropping entirely the teleological argument as incorrect and not worth using.
Well, I'm very, very open to the existence of a multiverse.
Bill, does the idea of a multiverse, many different kinds of universes, innumerable universes, does that bother your theism?
No, it doesn't bother my theism at all. I think that God, as the infinite creator of all space and time, could create separate space-time manifolds or create a universe so vast that there would be different causally unconnected domains within one universe. So once you have an infinite transcendent creator, there's simply no problem with the scope of the space-time world that he brings into being.
Timothy O'Connor does the same thing.
Recent scientifically motivated multiverse hypotheses explode the scale of contemplated physical reality to a nigh unimaginable degree. For those who suppose that such cosmological theorizing has a significant measure of empirical support, this too is hotly debated. The epistemic likelihood that many other did creatures' kinds exist will be significant too. But there are also philosophical come theological reasons stemming from Leibnizian reflections in outline to suppose that reality is a great deal larger than the domain of human observation and influence. Leibniz is surely correct that a being who is necessarily infinitely wise and good will always act for a reason, and indeed where such is available, for the best reason, all things considered. God's actions can bear no trace of sheer caprice or arbitrariness. Among God's actions is the creation of our universe, whose composition is rife with seemingly arbitrary values: the total number of stars, the precise ratio of fundamental particles, the exact speed of light, and so on. It must have been good for God to create our universe, else he would not have done so. But it seems that it would have been good also for God to create a universe of a more or less different fundamental character. There is not time to fully explore this matter, so I will limit myself to some brief remarks. Leibniz held this to be the best of all possible worlds, believing that the infinitely wise God would be able to solve for the optimal balance of good-making features of possible created realities, analogously to the way that one may solve for a minimal or maximal value of a curve or size of a region in calculus. In particular, God would solve for the maxi-min value of a world with endless variety that is governed by extremely simple fundamental principles. I want to note that this general approach is not inconsistent with its turning out that a very large, possibly infinite, multiverse be the desired solution. And for my purposes, I'm going to be thinking about multiverses as universes that are individually spatio-temporally connected totalities, but that are not causally connected to one another, save in their common origin in God. And indeed, there is, to my mind, a plausible argument from incommensurable goods for such a conclusion, although it is one that Leibniz could not accept. While our universe plausibly is very good in some respects, in orderliness, in beauty, in its capacity to give rise to morally free creatures, at least some of these goods may well come at the expense of other possible goods, kinds of structured complexity inconsistent with the kind exhibited in our universe, and corresponding kinds of beauty. That is, these other possible goods and certain actual goods could not coexist within a single universe governed by uniform natural laws. If this is so, we might well be disinclined to follow Leibniz in thinking that the overall value of universes with incommensurate individual goods can nonetheless, in every case, be ranked with respect to each other. And if we do so, we are probably dissatisfied with Leibniz's highly abstract understanding of metaphysical perfection as the determinant of God's choice. So where does that where does that leave us? We should, I think, go with Leibniz, at least to the extent of saying that God would be disinclined to pick one value over another arbitrarily. He would do so only if forced to choose. But, I note, he needn't choose between the options that I've been broaching, as he might create the best of every class of possible universes whose members are commensurate in value. That is, you might think of possible universes as falling out not on one single great chain of being, right, but on a branching structure. So all universes that are relatively similar can perhaps be ranked, possible universes can be ranked with respect to one another, but distinct branches, there's no value comparison between them. They're just too disparate in the kinds of values that they manifest, right? And then you say, God looks at the whole branching structure and says, I'll take the top value of each of them. This collection of top valued members would, it seems, collectively constitute the best possible world. Quite possibly, many of these universes possess the value of containing dib creatures, remember, divine image-bearing creatures. But many depart more radically from Leibniz by rejecting his view that there is a best possible world. I don't have time to go into reasons why you might reject that, but suppose
for the moment that he was so mistaken in thinking that there is a best possible world. Perhaps for each or some of the value-ordered branches of commensurable universe kinds, there is no top value corresponding to one or more of the kinds. I think that this scenario, too, points in the direction of a multiverse, indeed of an infinitely membered one. For it is hard to credit the thought that a perfectly wise being of limitless power, contemplating each of the, we're now supposing, infinitely ascending branches of the creative possibilities, should just arbitrarily reach up and pick one from each, fully aware that whichever one he picks, no matter how far up the scale he goes, there are others of enormously greater value than it. Again, if he had no choice but to make such an arbitrary selection, I, unlike Leibniz, would be willing to suppose that he might well do so. But he did have a choice, for he could choose an appropriate threshold of goodness and create every one of the infinitely many universes above that threshold, or every other one, or every millionth one, doesn't matter. So there could be a scope for contingency of a pretty strong sort here.
That was the Sci, and then he proceeds to the Fi, fiction, multiplying the incarnation of Jesus. Because scientists lately find ingenious ways to use technologies to discover new planets in our universe, forget the multiverse, this is more pressing, in a habitable zone around distant stars.
Both these indirect methods are most effective at finding big planets close to their stars, because the speeds involved and the amount of light blocked are greater, and also because close planets orbit more often, so we don't have to wait as long to notice their effects. There are other more complicated and fancy methods that can find planets which are harder to notice via star wobbling or starlight blocking, and all of these together have combined to help us discover more than 1,800 exoplanets as of 2014.
The eureka in theologians' minds is that, well, if there is alien intelligent life on these new planets that have been discovered, that doesn't make Christianity false. On the contrary, they would incorporate that into their faith as well, saying that God has sent his son, or is it himself? It is part of himself. You know, the paradox of the Trinity, under another name to this other planet with alien intelligent life. It was Jesus on Earth, but on another planet where scientists may discover intelligent life, he could send Joshua.
Section 2, how to be a multiply incarnate deity. Consider the person known as Jesus of Nazareth on Earth and as Joshua of Namath on Gliese 581G, which is, according to what I've read, the nearest planet outside our solar system in a habitable zone of its solar system. And consider the suggestion that these apparently distinct persons are in fact the very same divine, multiply creatured person. This requires the possibility that one person can occupy two widely separated spatial regions. But note that it is not a case of multi-location of bodies, whereby one wholly material object wholly occupies more than one spatial region. And that's a good thing, for such multi-location, though toyed with by some recent physicians, is a highly problematic idea. For the two bodies of Jesus/Joshua are distinct objects, parts of the one person who lives through them. As I said a moment ago, on the incarnational picture I proposed, these bodies, instances of human and Gliesian nature, having mental as well as physical attributes, are inherently dependent entities, not proper substances in their own right. But insofar as we do think of them in isolation from the one individual they partly compose, they are wholly distinct. To whom or what does Peter refer when he points and says to John, "There is Jesus"? I take it that he refers to the person Jesus, So, if multiple incarnations are the case, he unknowingly refers to a person who is also, and perhaps simultaneously, occupying a planet far, far away. And if he says, there is the body of Jesus, he makes, at least on a natural disambiguation of what he says, a mistaken assumption of uniqueness. For the person Jesus has more than one body. Now, if he were philosophically savvier than we have reason to suspect the uneducated fisherman from Galilee really was, he could say truly, there and only there is the human body of Jesus. Now, you might sense a more troublesome oddity when we turn from the body to the mind of Jesus on this picture. If Jesus of Nazareth is the very same person as Joshua of Namath, the thought goes, then Jesus' mental states would seem to be very confused. He would be thinking, for example, John is my beloved disciple, and Giles is my beloved disciple. But this thought itself rests on a confusion concerning the doctrine of incarnation. Jesus is the incarnate Son of God. He has a fully divine and fully human mind, and these are distinct ranges of thought of one person. The restricted human mental life of Jesus will have no access to the Glesian thoughts of Joshua, and vice versa. The human mind of Jesus will presumably not even include awareness that he is incarnated on Glesia 581G. But the eternal Son of God is, in his divine mind, fully and simultaneously aware of all the thoughts flitting through both of the creaturely minds associated with the names Jesus and Joshua. That is, his creaturely minds. And this is just a special case, a special kind of inside knowledge, owing to his being incarnated as Jesus and Joshua, of his knowledge of all creaturely thoughts in creation. There is, I suggested, but one center of subjectivity in this multiply incarnated divine person.
And I have to ask myself whether those people, and the aliens, they may not be people, this alien intelligent life, whether they are fallen as well. Because the story on earth is that, the story in the Bible is that Adam and Eve, and they made the first sin by disobeying God, and that was their first sin, and thereafter all their descendants until us are fallen, they are sinners. What was the first sin that those alien intelligent creatures could have committed? Was it the same sin? Did they have Adam and Eve there with other names? Think of some Jewish names. I will try to keep you informed if we learn about any other breaking news in the development of Christian theology. Bye!